Artificial intelligence is being controlled by a group of criminal organisations that are exploiting the work of creatives for their own profit. So claims Ed Newton Rex, the former VP of Audio at Stability AI, in an op-ed for British newspaper The Times on Tuesday. Is he right? Or should we believe the claims of AI companies that the use of their work inside generative AI models is fair use? The same legal principle that allows creators to reference content for the use of parody, criticism, or commentary. At Newsing, we've been operating at the intersection of AI and music since 2017. Let's dig into this and everything else that just happened in AI music. Though it's been a big week for AI broadly, with big announcements from Google, Microsoft, and more, there wasn't quite the same volume in AI music. However, the news that has come out may have huge ramifications for how music copyright is approached in Gen AI models going forwards. First off, bad news from the UK for the creative class, where a proposed code of conduct for the usage of copyright inside generative AI has been shelved. This mooted code was being discussed as part of a consultation between the UK government, creative organisations, and AI companies. The dialogue was managed by the UK Intellectual Property Office, and its purpose was to create a voluntary rulebook for UK AI practitioners. Groups such as the BBC, the British Library, and news organisations were discussing with Microsoft, Google DeepMind, and AI startups such as Stability. The failure to reach consensus is unsurprising given the vast chasm that exists in attitudes towards creative works between these groups. On the one hand, original content is the lifeblood of creative organisations, whereas on the other, creative content is essential for the training of generative AI models. The industry is asking for transparency on what models have and haven't been trained on, and what works are being used, said Rima Selhi, a representative of the Design and Artists Copyright Society, who joined the consultation. The Intellectual Property Office hasn't found answers to those questions. Unsurprising. I don't have enormous respect for the UK Intellectual Property Office, or the way that copyright is managed generally. This consultation was destined to fail, as the UK government is more interested in incentivising big tech to stick around than in supporting creatives. We had rather better news from Europe the previous week that member states had approved the final draft of the EU AI Act. The news was welcomed by the music industry, with International Confederation of Music Publishers, John Phelan, saying the act would hold to task the recent wave of AI companies who refuse to observe laws and are illegally acquiring the world's music to train their models. The International Federation of the Phonographic Industry, the group that represents the interests of major and independent record labels, had this to say: "We believe there is a path to a mutually successful outcome for both the creative and technology communities. Success requires guardrails, policies that enable and require responsible AI. We urge the European Parliament to approve this first of its kind legislation without delay." It's amazing that it's coming to this so soon in the life cycle of these powerful AI tools. And a shame that transparency has been such a taboo for tech. Don't you realise that regulation could seriously hamstring the development of AI if you don't prioritise ensuring that creators get compensated fairly for the usage of their work? This should be the number one new revenue opportunity for creators. This is being reflected in company valuations. Meta paid its first ever dividend last week. Why is tech being so coy about paying for this component of this fabulously lucrative technology? It's just because it's always been so easy to mine data. There have never been guardrails in place, and tech has taken this for granted. We shouldn't leave it to legislators to fix this, but rather seize the moment to provide the transparent tooling that allows music to be purveyed remuneratively. Then, when AI companies come to train their next model, they have no choice but to pay out musicians, artists, and rights holders properly. It requires an infrastructural shift in distribution mechanisms so that metadata is coupled with source audio and cryptographic payment rails. These have been sorely missing from digital music distribution since it was a thing, frankly. The capital efficiencies from this change everything and put the balance of power firmly back in the hands of creators and rights holders. With lawmakers around the world discussing this right now, it's clear that this is our time. The former VP of Audio at Stability AI, the developers of popular text-to-image model, Stability Diffusion, published 2 op-eds on Monday and Tuesday. Ed Newton Rex resigned from Stability AI last year over its position that training GenAI models on copyrighted content is fair use, and has gone on to found non-profit organisation Fairly Trained that has set up a system to certify GenAI companies on the fairness of their training standards. More on that later. The first op-ed was published in Music Business Week, where he called out Google for reportedly training on music without permission. He noted that formerly Google had been deeply respectful to train their models only on music they had the right to use, from public domain music to music datasets they commissioned themselves and publicly released. He attributes this to many of the team working on the music models being musicians themselves. However, he notes, something changed at Google. The announcement for Google's much vaunted music model came alongside talk of ethical AI. Lyria was used inside the beta of Dream Tracks that featured the voices of artists like Charlie Puth and John Legend with their permission. However, according to a Billboard report, Google trained Lyria on copyrighted music from major labels before going out to secure deals. The approach evidently being to ask for forgiveness rather than permission, something Newton Rex challenges in his article. This approach is not how to go about acquiring training data for generative AI. It doesn't give rights holders a level playing field for negotiations. Of course, this is what's been happening. You can't rely on Scout's honor to protect a treasure trove of data from wildly competitive tech companies. Imagine if your house didn't have a lock on the front door and no security system. Anyone could just walk in and take your possessions when you weren't there. It's against the law to do that, but we still build houses with locks, as the reality is that some bad eggs may take advantage otherwise. It's the same with music. It doesn't take much work to figure out how to scrape music from Spotify or any other streaming service. Even if legislation is put in place, big tech will find a way to circumvent it. And it will just create a moat that means the little guy can't compete. In his second op-ed in The Times, Newton Rex described AI companies' mass harvesting of creative data as the greatest art heist of all time. He refers to the 3 resources required to build generative AI models. 1. AI engineers. 2. Vastly powerful chips such as those developed by NVIDIA. And 3. Training data. Or in other words, people's work. Close to the entire creative output of humankind is stored in a cloud somewhere with no real security system. AI companies spend eye-watering sums on the first 2, but expect to get the third for free. He goes on to postulate that designers, composers, voice actors will be outcompeted by AI systems that work faster and cost less than people ever could. Newton Rex is a composer himself, and you can understand his motivation from this fact. He couldn't abide the status quo being pursued by tech. His non-profit, Fairly Trained, has now certified 9 generative AI companies, with 8 of them being based on music or sound. The goal is evidently for the Fairly Trained standard to be recognised similarly to a food standard like fair trade or organic, and it's certainly a step in the right direction for this kind of thing to exist. However, many of the most popular Gen AI music tools are not on this list. Though it may help professionals who are motivated to make an ethical choice about which generative AI tool to help them make background music for their video, for the vast majority, models like Lyria, trained on every song in existence, will simply blow Fairly Trained models like this out of the water. The reality is, for most of us, the ethical choice does not factor into our usage of technology. It's simply about convenience and performance. There are no simple answers to the way that music has been harvested for use inside Gen AI models. And as outraged as you should be for what's happened, it's now been done. These models have been trained, and the reality is this will continue to happen whether lawmakers try to force behaviour or not. At Newsic, we see the ongoing development of AI music as inevitable, and we are building the rails and advocating for the following. 1. Consensual data sets, the best possible musical data that is provided with the most granular musical information with the consent of its creators. 2. Trackable metadata. By coupling the metadata with the source audio, we can serve data via a pipeline that tracks its usage. It's like an X-ray for a neural network. 3. cryptographic payments. It's not enough to couple music datasets with trackable metadata, but payment rails should be included as part of the pipeline. Therefore, when a piece of music is referenced by an AI, the model will have no choice but to allocate a payment towards it when a new work is monetized. With royalty splits administered automatically, this eliminates human error and includes the fundamental remunerative infrastructure as part of the AI itself. It shouldn't be controversial to suggest that we build technology that protects the very people its creators stand to gain so much from. And until we see this implemented at scale, it's our duty to continue to build and share information. Adoption is just around the corner. This is Adam Place, signing off for Newsic. Subscribe to stay up to date with the latest in this exciting space.